I'm Lisa Shepard, and I am the Executive Director of the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. The mission of the CJCP is to enhance professionalism among North Carolina lawyers, judges, and law students, a mission which it has been doing since 1998. One of the ways that the CJCP does this is to sponsor this historical video series, which is a collection of video interviews of distinguished lawyers, judges, and professionals from across North Carolina. The CJCP began filming these video interviews in 2000 as a means to preserve the thoughts of these bar leaders on the legal profession and on professionalism issues. All of the videos in this series are available to you on the CJCP website and the CJCP's dedicated YouTube channel. We are so fortunate to have had many distinguished members of the North Carolina Bar over the years, and they have much accumulated wisdom to share with us. It is important to understand that the practice of law is a profession, and doing it well requires not only substantive knowledge that one gains in law school and from studying for the bar exam, but also the value of experience learned from other lawyers. I hope that this video series will give you not only a fresh insight into the person being interviewed, but also some meaningful information about how to be a better lawyer in your own practice. Enjoy, and remember, esse quam videri. Strive to be professional in all that you do, rather than to merely seem so.
Welcome to the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism historical video series. Today we are fortunate to be in the offices of Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice, and to have with us a distinguished lawyer who has set the professionalism standards in the United States, in North Carolina, and in Forsyth County since 1939. He is Mr. William F. Womble of the firm of Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice. I've interviewed other outstanding lawyers and legal scholars for this series, but Mr. Womble is unique in that he is the recipient of the first Chief Justice's Award for Professionalism. This award will be presented annually by the Chief Justice to lawyers who have exemplified the qualities of professionalism to which we all should aspire. Mr. Womble has, as you would imagine, had an outstanding legal career. He has been the president of so many different organizations. His resume is extremely lengthy, and I will not take the time to go into all of his outstanding achievements, but I will give you an idea of some of the things that he has accomplished in his career. He has been president of the Forsyth County Bar Association, where his practice primarily was located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He's been president of the North Carolina Bar Association, a member of the American Bar Association's Board of Governors and the ABA's House of Delegates, the Executive Council of the National Conference of Bar Presidents, the ABA Standing Committee on Ethics and Professional Responsibility. In 1984, he was the recipient of the North Carolina Bar Association's John J. Parker Award. In 1995, he received the 50-year award from the Fellows of the ABA. He was a trustee for the IOLTA program with the North Carolina State Bar. He was a representative in the North Carolina legislature. He's been president of the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce, a trustee at Winston-Salem State University, and a trustee at High Point University. He was the president and organizer of the Triad United Methodist Home. He's been an outstanding leader throughout his career in his community, in his church, and in the legal field. Mr. Womble, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Mr. Womble, when did you first decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
Well, I grew up in the law. My dad was a lawyer, and so it was just a natural as far as I was concerned. It was a profession that I grew into. I used to go down to the office, even as a small boy, and wander around down there. It was quite small in those days.
I believe you graduated from Duke University Law School in 1939.
That's right.
While at Duke, were certain principles of professionalism such as civility and competency and honesty and integrity and ethics emphasize and stress to you?
Yes, as I recall, Dean Horak was not only dean, but he was also an excellent example of just a top quality professional, and we just referred to it as ethics in those days, but that was a part of not only his emphasis, but you got the same thing from other professors at the school.
When you graduated from law school, you chose to take a job at Manley, Hendren, and Womble as an associate. I believe at that time your father was the senior member of that firm. Why did you decide to go to work in that firm at that time?
Well, it didn't occur to me to go anywhere else. I don't recall applying for the job. It was just one of those things I did when I got out of school, and they had an office for me, and I went to work.
At that time, how many lawyers were in the firm?
There were 4 partners: my dad, B.S. Womble, Irving Carlisle, Penn Sandridge. Linville Martin was a member at that time, and the firm was, the firm was Manley, Hendren, and Womble. It was the firm name that it had from 1911.
And when you started, was it a general practice firm, or did you specialize? What type of law did you do when you started?
It was a general civil practice.
Okay. And throughout your career, did you concentrate in any particular areas of the law, or did you continue with a general?
Well, I look upon myself as probably one of the last, if not the last, general practitioner in our firm. When I started practicing law, it was going over to the courthouse and checking titles to property and a fair amount of real estate work, and I soon got into a variety of things: banking, corporate matters, insurance matters. I did a good bit of work from the beginning, working with Irving Carlisle, who was handling the city's work, and it just, wills and trusts, a little bit of everything.
And when you began practice, the practice of law, was there anyone that you considered at that time a mentor?
I don't recall we ever used the term mentor, but when you started practice, it was typical, as it was in my case, to be in an office with older lawyers. If you were a sole practitioner, you usually tied in with somebody in some way to get some help. In the case with our firm, there were 4 lawyers. My dad, of course, was, I guess that he would probably have more to do with my wording of documents, and he was a pretty good wordsman when it came to scratching through and getting things right. And then, of course, Irving Carlisle, and to some extent Dad in litigation, but litigation more Irving Carlisle and Penn Sandridge. Corporate matters, also Penn Sandridge. Real estate, Linville Martin, or Hip Martin as we call him.
We have today a number of young lawyers who finish law school and open up their own office, or maybe a couple of them will leave law school and open a partnership with just the 2 or 3 of them. Do you think it's important for new lawyers to have a mentor, someone they can turn to for advice and suggestions in tough times?
I would think it's almost essential if they want to get off on the right foot. In the case of my dad, for example, he was a sole practitioner, but he was occupying space in the office of Colonel Blair, who was an older lawyer in town. And Colonel Blair just let him have space in the office to get started. But I think it's important. I think it was important then. I think it's important now.
I think we all are going to be faced with situations where, whether it's trying a case or drafting a will or doing any type of negotiation, where things are going to come up that new lawyers haven't experienced before. And when the ethics and the professionalism problems arise, it's good to be able to turn to somebody for advice. Do you agree?
You take, just in the routine practice I used to do when I was much younger, a great deal of work that involved going over to the courthouse. Bill Church was our clerk of court. When I was starting a special proceeding, of course, he was a stickler. in his case, I would take it over to him, make sure that he approved of it. That way I'd know it'd get through.
That's right.
But same thing's true in any practice. I think you need somebody that you can lean on.
And I think that's an excellent point that you brought up. We as lawyers are very dependent on people in the courthouse, the clerks and the bailiffs in the courtroom. All of those people are very important to each of us in our practice and how we conduct ourselves. I know that you were involved in World War II from about 1941. And
I was drafted in 41 and got home at the end of 45.
did your experience in the military affect your legal career in any way?
Largely, it took me out of it. Now, I did do some work as defense counsel and some court martials when I was appointed as defense counsel for a person that was charged with some violation of military law. Also, toward the end of my time in service, I was in the office of the Judge Advocate of the 15th Air Force Service Command. And so I was getting back into some legal work, and in that office I served as a summary court officer, which would be like a municipal judge, that sort of thing.
Do you see any difference today in the practice of law as it exists in 2001 than when you returned from World War II and began practicing in Winston-Salem in about 1946?
Of course, the mechanics of practicing law were totally different in the sense that you dictated straight to your secretary, who was wonderful at shorthand and wonderful at typing on the old typing machines, typewriters. Today, you're dictating totally into a machine, or you're using your own terminal, your own computer in your own office, and just the mechanics of the practice. Your copy work, for example, all of your copying now is done with your copy machines. You don't have carbon papers and having to go through multiple copies and erasures and all the rest of it. So the mechanics of everything are different. Technology, the maintenance of records, the maintenance of time records, none of that was like it is today.
What about the relationship between attorney and client? The basic need for the...
Well, I think the basics are always the same. Now, if you're talking about, when you get to the basics, that's what we always say to the young lawyers. The one thing that we think has held our firm together has been the basics, the idea of honesty and integrity and being a student of the law, doing the work you need to do in a professional way, and those things. Those things don't change. They always were there. Like my dad, when I started out, said the law is a jealous mistress. Another way he put it was that a lawyer who has stopped studying has retired, whether he knows it or not.
That's right. If a student, whether high school or college or a law student, is thinking about going into the legal field as a career today, would you encourage them to do so, and if so, what advice would you give them?
I would say that the profession is still an honorable profession, just like it was as far back as I've ever known anything about the law. And I think that you hear much more criticism of the law. Whether there is more criticism or not, I don't know how much more. I'm sure that there have always been times when lawyers were criticized, because lawyers, unlike doctors are always trying to help a person. There's no controversy. You're not trying to decide whether to keep the person alive or kill them. In a law firm, you've got controversy, and there's going to be a winner and a loser, and the loser wants to blame somebody, and might blame. He seldom blames himself. He'd rather blame the court or the lawyer. So you have that basic difference that does impact the lawyers' reputations, I think.
During the late 40s, you began a strong and highly regarded public service record to the bar. Some of that service included local and state bar associations as well as the ABA. You were noted for being instrumental in desegregating the North Carolina Bar Association in the 1960s and held various leadership positions in just about every aspect of the bar. You served as a member of the North Carolina House of Representatives, and you continued to hold strong commitments with your church and throughout public and civic organizations. Tell us how you became interested in so many avenues of public and civic service as well as your legal career, and how that service affected your family life and the practice of law. How were you able to do so many different things?
That's a pretty big question.
It is a big question. The other side would normally object to that. The judge would make me ask it a little differently. But how did you do so many things for so many different groups and do them so well?
I don't know how well I did them, but I can't help but just feel I came by it naturally. I did not set out to do many of the things that I did. I just I got into the church work. I got into the bar work. I felt it was all a part of life, I guess. And I'm sure that there were times, I know there were times when I was in the legislature that you were talking about family, that I was away from family too much. As a matter of fact, that was one of the reasons I quit after 3 terms in the legislature rather than going on. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being in the legislature. I enjoyed the relationship and what I was doing. But our children were young. We had 3 children at that time. And it was tough on Jane to be away as much as I was. And so after 3 terms, I decided I better quit.
Do you think that public service is important for our profession, whether it be in the legislature or the school board or coaching a soccer team? Is public service an important thing and part of professionalism?
To me, it's one of those things that I think most any good professional will get into, either by design or by being called upon. And I think it's important. And nobody ever encouraged me to run for the legislature that I recall. In fact, I sometimes wonder about people who talk about how much they were encouraged to run. I think most of the time it's an individual decision.
We've heard in the last few years quite a bit of emphasis on professionalism in the courtrooms and in the boardrooms. Do you think that it is important for judges to be a part of the professionalism movement?
I think it is, and I think that we are probably seeing more of that now than we have previously. I think that maybe just because it wasn't emphasized like it is now, but somehow or other it does seem to me that it's important. And I think that part of that is due to the fact that there is so much publicity about the profession, and so many ratings of the profession as being low on the totem pole when it comes to public esteem. And another side of that coin, I think, is it may help the judges themselves. I think sometimes judges have been very helpful to lawyers, and sometimes they were sort of apart from that and expected the lawyer to take care of all that himself without the cooperation or the emphasis that might come from the court.
You wrote an outstanding article in, I believe, August of '95. It was published by the Bar Association to 4 summer interns that work with your firm. And you gave them some advice in that article. As you think back about that article and you think back about advice that you would give to your son, Bill Jr., who was an outstanding lawyer with your firm, or to any young lawyer who is starting out in the practice of law today, what advice would you give them?
Well, that letter came out of just a luncheon conversation, and if I'd set out to write it, I guess I couldn't have written it. But I went back to the office and I just began to think about things we'd been talking about, and I dictated it, and it happened to come out pretty well. The idea at that time, the purpose of that letter was simply to indicate to them the desirability and possibly the need for a well-rounded life, that you need to have emphasis on your work and your whole professional side of it. You need to have emphasis and time for your family. You need to have time for recreation. You can have a wonderful life if you balance it. And I think that was probably the emphasis of that letter, if I recall.
You're the senior partner in the largest firm in North Carolina now, which has approximately 430 lawyers. You have been able to recruit, if you will, some truly outstanding lawyers in that firm throughout your career and my career, and I've always been so impressed with the people that are at your firm. The firm has grown tremendously in the last 50 years. What professionalism advice would you give to lawyers who choose to practice in a large firm, for example? So much of the discussions that we have are to new lawyers who start out on their own or in a small practice. What about lawyers who go to a large firm?
Well, as you know, we have an orientation program for young lawyers who come with the firm. And Ellen Gregg in our office, in our firm, does a wonderful job organizing that program. It's multifaceted. It covers all the aspects of the practice. One of the first things that's done in that program is to talk a little bit about the history of the firm, and then to emphasize ethics and move on from there. Now, what we are talking about there are the basics, the core values. Because with all of the changes, you were talking about how many changes there have been, and I was mentioning a few of the mechanical changes that we've seen. But the basics stay the same, and that's one of the strong emphases, the idea of being honest, being fair with clients, fair with other employees, fair with your staff, treating other people as you would be treated, working always toward trying to do things right. And I think if you stick with that, you have devotion to your clients, you have devotion to the law.
One of the core values that you mentioned, or that I think would be important for us to mention, would be pro bono service. I know that you've always encouraged that and been a part of that. We hear so much emphasis in the professionalism arena about the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and of course Atticus Finch in that book was doing pro bono criminal work, but yet set the standard for so many professionalism qualities. Is pro bono work something that you would encourage lawyers to do as a part of their career?
Absolutely. Professor John Bradway had the legal aid clinic at Duke when I was there. And I guess that was the thing that started a good many of us who went to Duke back in the 30s on the course of seeing merit in helping people who needed help and couldn't afford it. And I've always been an advocate of a good legal aid program.
When you remember the many men and women that you considered outstanding lawyers, what was it about them that set them apart and made them outstanding?
They were good people. They were honest. They were, as far as the legal profession is concerned, they were what we think of as a quality professional person. They were a person who, by reason of the way they lived and the way they practiced law, wound up having a certain amount of respect that set them apart.
This may be a difficult question for you, but what things do you consider your most outstanding contributions or achievements during your career?
Not sure. I think my legislative service was important. For many years, I was city attorney, drawing all the ordinances, attending the meetings, well, anything that had to do with the administration of the city from the legal side of it, defending lawsuits. That was important in my career. And then another area that tied in with the practice that I was involved in was representing the school board. And much of my heavy school board work came during the time of the well, first the consolidation of the city and county school system, and then after the Brown decision in '54, the desegregation of the schools and undertaking to comply with the law. And I do think that in North Carolina and in our community, particularly in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, it was tough, but I think we had good people on our board, good people in our school system, and working with them was it was a challenge, of course, to try to comply with the law and do things right, but that was an important part. And then in the area outside the law, I've been on the board of trustees of High Point University, formerly college, for over 50 years, which I never intended to do. And I have, as you mentioned, the establishment of Arbor Acres, the Triad United Methodist Home, I think has turned out to be an important thing. And then the work that I did with the bar and as chair of the committee that drafted the Model Code of Judicial Conduct back about 1990. There's just been a variety of things.
Right. In thinking about ethics and professionalism and some of the changes that you've seen, is there any particular area or any particular focus that you think we should look at to perhaps enhance or improve professionalism for the next generation?
I think we're on the right track of emphasizing what we referred to as core values. There is no better way, I think, to really enhance the profession than to have lawyers do quality work that has good results for clients and generates a sense of appreciation for their work. Now that can be in the area of wills and probate, real estate, litigation. It can be in all areas, corporate law, securities, just about everything. But it's a quality job done, working with your client and with respect for the system and with respect for the courts.
Mr. Womble, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today, sharing some of your thoughts about our profession, and I want to congratulate you again on being the first recipient of the Chief Justice's Professionalism Award.
Mel, a real pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.